Welcome back to Made to Be Whole. We're going to dive into another case study on anxiety this week, looking further for root causes and the nuanced approach that it sometimes takes to quell the fire. Stay tuned. Made to Be Whole is intended for informational purposes only. It's not intended to replace the advice or care of a licensed healthcare professional. Participating in this podcast does not constitute a provider-patient relationship with Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, or any of the guests featured on Made to Be Whole. Krista Michener, AHP Integrative Health, and any featured guests aren't responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from use of information obtained in this podcast or associated materials. Please consult a healthcare professional for any health-related concerns that you are experiencing. Welcome back. This is Krista. So we're going to talk a little more about anxiety. Last week, we talked about OCD and PANS PANDAS and that direction that the mind can sometimes go with infection. But I'm going to share a little more about another patient myself, because I've learned a lot of things recently in putting pieces together that I think would be helpful. So forgive me as I indulge. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I had been having some increased anxiety. It was really interesting because it was this strange fear-based anxiety that I hadn't had in a while, where I just wanted to be around my husband when I was home. I didn't want to be by myself. I didn't feel good. Well, a few days after I recorded that, I got back results. I had started to have urinary tract symptoms again. I got back my report and I had strep in my urine. So I started taking amoxicillin, and within a day or so, that fear-based anxiety went away, but I still was just super revved up, just having a hard time with my mind being still, figuring out what was going on. And it's just so frustrating when you felt better for things to slip. What I'm hoping to partly accomplish by this is to help you not become catastrophic in your thinking when things that were better get worse. I see too many people, they're doing better, they start to experience something again. They say, oh, it's back. I have X again. I have this. It's all for naught. And we can't do that. We have to be problem solvers, and we have to kind of stack our gains and use what I heard in a media interview from a basketball coach this morning, referred to as proof of concept. So this is my BYU Cougars men's basketball team, who's doing exceptionally well and hopefully still will be when this airs, but they're killing it. And one of the things that Coach Young said that he utilizes is this stacking wins. He's always talking about stacking the wins, but proof of concept. So if you have a game where you've done something really, really well, like you've really done a great job with those offensive rebounds, or you've done a really good job like blocking on the perimeter, like all of these different things, that's proof of concept. You know you're capable of that, so you can do that again. That's not a jump. That's not just a wish. I hope we can do this. You know you've got proof of that concept, and you can build on that. So if you've had things that have been better, you know your body's capable of feeling that way. You've got that proof of concept in your pocket. You just need to go back and figure out what was going on differently or what has changed since then. So one of the things that I decided to do was to do these weekly health audits of my family. And my husband's really encouraged me recently to put myself first, because I've got all these people I'm taking care of in my practice, but also we have 6 children. I have him. We all got health stuff, and I'm always taking care of all those things. And he's really encouraged me to put myself first. So I had this little inspiration to do these weekly health audits where every Sunday I go through one person's medical records in our family. And that'll be meaning that we'll hit everyone every 2 months, because there are 8 of us all together. I go through, I review labs, I look at where we are with symptoms, I see what adjustments need to be made. So when I went through and did this for myself, and this was just a week and a half ago at this point, I noted, and I knew this, but sometimes you forget, like I have a lot of genetic vulnerability for anxiety. And I think it's interesting because my husband, Eric, I did his report the next week, and he has very, very little. And that's really how our lives have been. I mean, prior to being treated for Bartonella, he had had occasional situational anxiety. Like he's an attorney and he was a prosecutor for a while. And so he would have anxiety before big trials because you really want to make sure that your victims get justice and get appropriate treatment. And that's a lot of stress. So you'd have that very appropriate situational anxiety that would pass when that stressful situation passed, but not this, I feel anxious and I don't know why. Well, if you go through Krista's report, there are a lot of different things genetically that can make me vulnerable to that. So one of them is the beta 2 adrenergic receptor or adrenaline response. So this particular genetic variant increases the response to adrenaline, which has been associated with a more than twofold increase in the risk of anxiety, as well as GI symptoms that sometimes accompany anxiety. So there's one. I also have a couple different genes that affect GABA signaling. So lower GABA signaling that can affect neurodevelopment. So sometimes that's a risk for autism. And I do have 2 kids who are on the spectrum. But it also, GABA is very, very important for anxiety, and using GABA with the right cofactors can be really, really helpful with anxiety. And that's key. There are a lot of things with the body that may be good, but you have to have the right cofactors, meaning things that you take with it to get them where they're supposed to go. So like with GABA, you can just take a GABA supplement, but it's really not going to be nearly as effective if you're not taking it with magnesium, B6. There's some other cofactors that can help make sure it gets to the brain and binds to those benzodiazepine receptors and causes that calming. I have genes that make me more prone to tissue damage from inflammation. I knew that. But then if I came down, I'm like, there's more with this anxiety, basically an increased ability to halt the production and release of serotonin versus overregulation, resulting in lower serotonin in various regions of the brain. So there's that too. So I went through this and I said, okay, I've got all of these things. What am I going to now do about it? So what does this report that I've already paid for and I've gone through and made adjustments, what does it tell me? Well, one of the things that I know, but that I hadn't been doing consistently, like more on an as needed basis, was I've found a GABA supplement that I think works like exceptionally well. I really, really like it. And it's called Stress Maintenance by the company Metabolic Maintenance. And I realized, because I already take a lot of supplements and other things, I've just kind of used it as needed, and it does help. But I thought, well, if I'm anxious all the time, maybe I need it more often. So I decided to up my stress maintenance, and I was going to take it twice a day, just routinely, to see how that went. And then because I also am prone to these higher levels of dopamine, basically I'm always living in a dopamine rush. And so that's why I don't really like thrill-seeking behavior, because I'm living on the edge all the time. And because of this genetic variant I have with my dopamine receptor D2, I'm always on that dopamine high. And I thought, well, what do I know about that? Well, I know that there's a supplement I really like that has bacopa and ashwagandha in it that is really helpful for kind of bringing that down and also helping with high cortisol. So I'm going to go ahead, and instead of just taking 2 a day most days when I remember it, I'm going to do 2 twice a day. So I started the next day doing 2 twice a day of my stress maintenance and of my new Adapt, which has the bacopa, ashwagandha, other ingredients in it. And I literally, like within that day, I felt calmer. I was not anxious, high strung, couldn't think. Now, the interesting thing that I thought, because I was able to put this fire out in my brain, I was able to do some problem solving about my other symptoms, because I had started over the previous few weeks to really wear out early in the evening. So where I would get to the point where it was really difficult to hold my body up. I'd kind of get through work, making dinner, and I would have to go lay down, sometimes for a little bit, sometimes for a couple hours. It was just getting really, really difficult. Now, because I had calmed the anxiety down, I was able to actually analyze what was going on instead of just reacting emotionally to it. And I said to myself, self, I think you know what that is. You don't want it to be, but those are definitely babesia symptoms for you. And even though I was still taking some maintenance things for babesia, I was still taking Ericotis, still taking Artemisia. Those are very, very clear babesia symptoms for me. The heaviness, and then I get this tension down the right side of my spine, and sometimes my body like contracts to the right, and it's just so difficult to explain, but if you've had it, you know it. It's just this very, very deep tension that nobody can quite get out. That was up too. And I knew, Krista, this is one of your babesia symptoms. And because I wasn't in this heightened, anxious state, I was able to say, now, why could that be? Is it because the world's out to get me? Is it all for naught? No, it's not all for naught. But I know that I have been very deliberately taking things to break up biofilms. I know that I'm still doing semifibrinolytic. So those things have the effect of breaking up and releasing hidden infection. So it's not surprising, or shouldn't be, that I would have a flare of symptoms. So what do I have in my toolbox that I can use to address this? So I said, well, I need to restart atovaquone and add it to the mix. And I had some still at home, which is an anti-babesial medication. I started it. I started to have that dreaded Herxheimer reaction. And because my anxious mind had calmed, I was able to say to myself, instead of, I can't believe this is happening, how long is it going to ask? I'm like, well, this is expected, and this means I made the right decision. This is what I needed to do. But, that die-off was very short-lived, a few days, and I've already had improvements in those symptoms. And so, like last night, the night before, I was able to just go. Last night, I was able to go until about 8, but I still had a lot more I needed to do for my family. So I laid down for like a half hour, and then I was able to get up and get it done and stay up and watch BYU beat number 10 Iowa State, which was pretty cool. Wouldn't have been able to do that before. And am continuing to increase my dose. So again, I tell you all of this not because everybody needs to run out and buy the supplements that I took, but to help you understand that all of this is very, very nuanced. And so, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Some people really, really want all things to be fixable through nutrition. Some people feel like, I don't know, yoga can fix all of your problems. Some people feel like if you just treat the infection, everything else will go away. And none of those things are generally true, especially as you get older. I'm 50, and things don't work as well as they did when I was 20. And my husband and I are both like getting to the point in life where we're feeling age a little more. And so all of those things that you're vulnerable genetically are going to express themselves more the longer you live. So any investment that you make in, whether it be a device like a sauna or vibration plate, in supplements and nutrient testing and the genetic testing that I feel pretty passionately about, go back. Don't just accumulate what was it called? Like the appliance graveyard that some people would have, where you have all these little small appliances in your kitchen that you buy and use 2 or 3 times, and then they just gather dust. Don't let things just accumulate. Go back and get into a pattern of assessing and saying, what do I have? How has it worked? What am I using consistently? What am I not? Do an audit of the information that you have and see what you can do to change what's going on with you. What can you do with what you already have? Because so many things, we don't maximize the benefits because we're looking for quicker fixes. So I'll introduce you to week 2 then of my audit, which isn't about me, it's about my husband, but he's a willing participant in all that. First of all, it was affirming because I realized, like I said, I have a gazillion anxiety risk factors and he just doesn't, so that's part of why we've been affected very differently. But I was able to go back and look and say, he's got a lot of risk factors for cognitive problems down the road, and he's seen that in his family history. His grandmother had dementia. Now is definitely the time that I need to be more aggressive in making sure those things don't happen, that we minimize the risk of that. So some of the things that we're doing that I'll bring up because they've got some pretty widespread benefits. So one thing is nitric oxide. So he's genetically vulnerable to lower nitric oxide levels. Nitric oxide is really important for adequate circulation and can affect all sorts of things, cognition, heart disease, all sorts of things. So I said, we're going to go back and we're going to say, this is a genetic risk factor. We know he's been helped by some of the things we're doing. We're just going to up him to twice a day instead of once a day. Things that are available to all of you. Neo 40, I've mentioned before, is an awesome product for nitric oxide. I have had several patients that it has resolved things like chest pain and palpitations because it's improving blood flow. If you don't have an actual structural problem with your heart and you're having symptoms that are related to blood flow, instead of just like waiting till someone has angina and then taking a sublingual nitroglycerin, why don't we instead increase nitric oxide levels, increase blood flow all the way around? So Neo 40, that's on our store website. That's a great product. Another one is Vinia, which I think I've mentioned before, but it's VINIA. It is a fantastic product. Their website is vinia.com. It is a long-acting resveratrol or a purified grape seed extract. And I will tell you, this is my little geeky self, but when you open that bottle, like the beautiful purple color, the smell, you can tell this is the real deal. And what makes Vinia unique is that it is long-acting. Most resveratrol is in and out of you pretty quickly. It peaks and drops, but it's 12-hour sustained release, boosts nitric oxide production, which, as we've said, increases blood flow, circulation, is going to have cognitive benefits for energy. Another thing that I am doing based on the genetics is I got my husband a hydrogen water bottle. So hydrogen water, now you do have to be careful, like with everything, you want to look at reviews. You want to, all the glitters is not gold, but like it's you charge it and it generates hydrogen water from the regular water you put in it. It boosts antioxidant activity. It can really help with detoxification. And with some of his genetic pathways, there had been shown some benefits for that. So I got that and I made a plan for him because he's actually a really good patient. He'll point out to you that I'm a really bad patient and that all nurses are bad patients in his opinion. But he's a good patient. He says he does everything that I tell him to, which I don't know if that's true. But so what I did, I got him a hydrogen water bottle and I got one for work because I think it's really important to have ways to do the things you need for your health where you are. You can't be at work for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day and then expect you're going to come home, take care of your house, take care of your family, take care of your health, and get it all done in the little bit of time that you have left. It's just not practical. So how can you take health to where you spend your time? So the things that we're doing to help that process for him, I got him one of these hydrogen water bottle generators for him to use at work, suggesting that he do it, at least once, maybe twice a day. He has the vibration plate. He had kind of slacked on using that. So I want him to use the vibration plate at least once a day. And then we talked about with exercise. Sometimes it gets really overwhelming, especially if you live someplace where it's dark and cold. It's an awful pattern. You do great during the spring, summer, fall. You're outside walking and then it's dark at 5 and it's gray and dreary and wet and slushy and you don't want to do it. And so I said, you really need to start exercising and just start with 10 minutes a day. Who cares? Like he does push-ups already, but get on the treadmill 10 minutes a day because once you're doing 10, you're eventually going to feel good and you're going to go up to 15 and it's not going to be hard. And then you're going to want to do more and it gets easier. But we set ourselves up for failure if we say, okay, I have to exercise 30 minutes a day every day. then you miss a day and you've already failed. But if you say, I'm going to do I have 10 minutes every day? Very, very few people couldn't come up with 10 minutes a day. Or if you break it down into a weekly goal, that can be even more beneficial. And I've cited before, but there are several studies showing that the level of physical activity of 150 minutes a week has been very, very beneficial for reducing heart disease risk, reducing diabetes risk, mental health, pain, all sorts of things. And I love the weekly goals because you can, first of all, make up lost time, but you can divide that over whatever's practical for you. Maybe you just do 30 minutes 5 days a week. Maybe you do your 22 minutes a day, or maybe you break it up and do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night. There's so many different ways to make it work. But I would just recommend that you take whatever health goals you have, say what's reasonable for right now. What can I do right now? If I would have fixated on his report or my report, there's a lot more that we could do now other than the basic changes that I'm talking about, but then we would probably get overwhelmed and do nothing. And so if you can do these regular audits and you pick a couple of things to change at a time, change them, make yourself accountable. I pointed out before, I love it when people keep records. If you're just jotting things down, giving yourself credits for the things you do, and then come back periodically and say, okay, I've done that. What can I do next? And build on those successes. Do the, stack your wins like a successful basketball team, and recognize too that you're not failing if you're not shooting 100%. It really struck me just watching sports. I'm sorry. Like, if you're a 50%, shooter, you're really good. If you're 60%, from the free throw line, you're like amazing. Well, think about it. That means you've missed, a third to a half of your shots. You had to take all of those in order to get the ones that went in. And you're going to find this in your health journey too. Like, you're not failing if everything you do doesn't work or you don't succeed at it. You're not going to get the baskets to go in if you don't take the shots. So, if you try 10 different things and a couple of them work, focus on the ones that work. Don't say, oh my gosh, can you believe I did these 6 things or 5 things that didn't work? Who cares? That's how you learn. But be deliberate about what you do. Stack your wins. Make one change at a time so that you can judge what's going on, and recognize that health and healing is not an event. It's a journey. It's not going to happen all at once. It's a journey. And I can tell you that what I did would not have been as quote unquote magical if it weren't for all the other things I had done before. I know that wouldn't have been as effective if I hadn't treated that UTI, if I hadn't treated that horrible Bartonella, that I dealt with a long time ago, because my baseline anxiety was really bad when I was in the middle of Bartonella and Bartonella treatment. It's not like, oh, that's all I needed to know. And if I would have just known this before, I wouldn't have had anxiety. No, I was building on those other wins and then assessing what was going on at this moment. So be a student of your health, be a student of your body, stack your wins, and remember to always have hope, because you were made to be whole. Have a podcast question or suggestion? Text or call us on the podcast info line at 330-439-0686. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to be notified when new episodes release. And remember, you were made to be whole.